sit there and you can build wind turbines till, and you ain't gonna affect anybody. Or what few people you can buy them out. I mean, or you can hire them to help maintain it. Okay, so it's a different issue. But it's not built in your backyard.
Well, no, okay, but going to the establishment of the community issue, okay, to me, even though I agree that they should be a factor, being the aesthetics in the community, at the community level now, I'm talking to the individual homeowner, I'm talking to the community level. Whether your distance is 2,000 feet or 6,000 feet, the aesthetics in the community level that has actually nothing to do with it. It does have an impact on the homeowners who are closer to it if they have a visual of it. Then it does play a role at the individual level. But I'm just talking, at the 6 mile by 6 mile community level type of thing.
Okay, have you ever, I haven't been up to Mars Hill, I confess, but I have gone up to Cape Cod. And they have wind turbines there fairly close. I don't know how far. They're a dominant feature. People can live with it. I live near Dulles Airport, and let me tell you, when you're on the flight path for Dulles Airport, and I chose to live there. It's Dulles Airport was long there before I was. And then they started flying Concorde in. And guess whose house was right under the flight path? Okay, but that's a temporary, it flies over twice a week. Bottom line, though, I made a choice to do it. You have people that have lived in this community for 50 years, and now potentially they could have a big structure 2,000 feet from their backyard. Potentially.
And just so you know, I live under the flight path at Dulles too. When I lived in Maryland, okay, but I was a little further out than you, but I know what you mean. Because I was right under it.
And the perception I think the community will have if we do away, the distance, understand, is noise. Okay, let me back up. The science of the noise, I accept and all that. The distance gives an additional safeguard that the community says we're looking out for their interests. And we're talking about future projects here. Now maybe that is exclusionary, and if it is, then maybe we ought to rethink my position on that. But it doesn't affect the current, as best I can tell. But I think it sends a message. If we do away with the distance as well, people are going to have trouble accepting that. They can't get their arms around it. You give a test, and here's what 35 decibels are, and here's what 40, and this, that, and the other. But people can't really visualize that, I don't think. They can visualize 4,000 feet, or 3,000 feet, or 2,200 feet.
And he does have a point, because when I was driving down to Augusta this morning with a friend of mine who doesn't live in town or whatever, he lives in downtown Bangor, I was talking to him about this, and I actually said, we're going to take it down to 35 decibels, and I talked about 45 decibels and stuff like that, and he goes, what does that mean? And I had to take my iPhone out, with my regular full dB, and do it in the car, because he had no even concept for how many decibels was even in the conversation. Okay, and he's not a scientist, but he's a smart person, and as soon as I brought this up and put it in front of us, he could see, he immediately grasped the concept, okay, of what that actually meant. But the point being, without actually doing this in front of him, he had absolutely no idea, which is basically corroborating what Dave's saying.
All I'm saying is, this was approved on a certain set of criteria, and obviously there's some issues with the ISO contour maps and all that, and that's for the courts to decide. But we're in a position now for future projects that, if we just base it on sound, to me it's a moving target. And, depending on which side of the hill your house is on, it could be a different distance. As the technology gets better, it could be closer.
See, that's just it. As technology changes, everything is a moving target. From safety in cars to speed limits to...
But my car sitting in my driveway doesn't affect you.
Yeah, but when you're behind the wheel, it does.
Yeah, pop a few coals. All I'm saying is we're talking about a thing that once it's built, it's going to be with us forever. Or at least I'm 20 years. 60s, it'll probably,
I intend to live it.
It's going to be there. And, you know, if for some reason the calculations are wrong, then you get the issue of, you know, revoking operator's permit, you may have developers suing, you may have citizens suing. I'm just saying about having a greater safety margin, or having a safety margin beyond noise, it impacts the visibility of it, and it just gives us.
Why shouldn't, if you're putting in a safety margin, shouldn't it be based on some established scientific reason, not just arbitrary?
Not to be crude, but I'll cite it. I forgot the Supreme Court justice, but define pornography. I can't define it by knowing when I
Right,
see
well,
it.
that's the same problem with aesthetics or with what's noise rather than acceptable sound. Once you start trying to define something that can't be defined, you've got a problem.
Answer me this: what harm does it do? Having a safety margin distance in addition to the noise. What harm does it do? There's no pending projects.
Well, no, I guess what we're
Absolutely.
trying, and you have a point as far as what harm does it do, okay? And this is, you know, I will definitely say that having gone through this for months and all just getting nothing but grief, you know, for the work that you do and the research that you do or whatever, it does harden you to you know, into positions, okay? To some degree, there's probably some hardening, you know, into positions of science, you know, as opposed to hardening the positions of, I don't want them, so I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that they're not here, okay? So from the science perspective, I guess, you know, Bruce and I have looked at it from, if the sound is truly the issue, then let's regulate the sound as strictly as we absolutely can, and tighten it down, take away excursion limits, you know, come down to 35 and 45 decibels at property lines and things like that, you know, and tighten it right down, and maybe even a little quieter, you know, at property lines. Okay, because property lines were also an issue, so people seem to want to have protection at property lines. But what they want is protection at property lines. They want their protection at property lines, not compromise protection at property lines. So, you know, if we're willing to come down to decibel levels at property lines, you know, because, you know, people are concerned at that level, which we're interested in doing, then, you know, then where does distance even play? Or what, if you were gonna, just to kind of, just in academics here, like, if we go with the distance, like, what should the distance be referenced to? Should it be referenced to sensitive objects or sensitive receptors or whatever? Should it be referenced to property lines? Or should sound be referenced to property lines? Like, what should be the reference points?
Well, I think the reference point for now should be what the existing rule was, based on whether it was flawed science or not. The fact of the matter is, if we go with solely with sound, then you're going to have a hard sell with the community. You're going to have you're going to have a harder sell with the community, because people will not understand, what's that mean to my house? What's that mean? How close can that? Those are the questions you're going to ask. And we won't be able to answer. Oh, 35, unless we go around everybody's house and do a test, they won't know.
Okay, so the reference point should be still the houses. So
Well,
you're looking at
I think the existing cell was based on 4,000 feet. Okay, now realize, you know, that was probably an arbitrary number based on, you know, whatever. But I don't think if we say it's going to be based solely on sound, we can in good faith go around and tell the community we're trying to be stricter.
Well, I
I'm
just
saying
definitely in
there's
good
an
faith,
additional
but I'm
safety
agreeing
margin.
with you that it might be hard to sell for the exact reason that a friend of mine in the car had to do this one. I mean, I can do it in good faith, but it's going to be, from an academic perspective, much more difficult. I mean, so I mean, I agree with you on the cell
I
part.
don't know how else to explain it other than
Okay,
that.
so basically come back to it. So make commitments here, okay? So the commitment would be, you would say that you're not interested, or that's not the right way to put it, that the distance from the turbine to the house of 4,000 feet, or the sensitive receptor, if the 4,000 feet, you know, is okay, and not the property
With the
lines.
noise.
With
Well, I think if I understand it correctly, and once again, if I have misstated the fact, I apologize. My understanding was that noise and distance were the determining factors on the existing case. We're contemplating changing that. We're contemplating eliminating any distance and basing it solely on sound. I don't think in good faith we can go around and tell people that we're trying to be stricter about this. I'm just saying, I think it's a safety margin that will help make the projects more palatable to the community. If you
So-
base it on sound, you have a developer come in here and say, I want to put up a wind turbine on Rebel Hill Road. Well, that's probably a bad example,
Whatever.
wherever. Well, if you're a resident of Rebel Hill Road, well, how far is that going to be from mine? That's the first question. Oh, it's going to be 35 decibels at least.
Okay, so, all right, so
What's that
how,
mean?
how do we go about the answer for property lines? How do we protect property lines? 'Cause that's an issue.
Well, property line, you know, if I own 2/3 of Hopkins Pond Road, I could exclude, if we go property lines, I could exclude them forever.
I know, so
it's people's houses where
I'm agreeing with you, I'm not disagreeing, definitely, we're like what you said earlier, we're in violent agreement, okay? I guess the question I'm just trying to ask you is, how are you gonna answer the question about property lines?
Personally, I don't think property lines are that relevant because once again, I guess I'm being a little selfish here, but I'm looking at my own property lines. I got one property line that's 300 feet from my house, and I've got another property line on the other side that's probably 3,000 feet from my house, or 2,500 feet. It's such because my house is placed on one end of my lot.
Okay, well, I just wanna make sure that you understand
I understand
that you're gonna get asked about property lines, and what do you do about property lines?
Well, property line to me is an arbitrary thing. I can sit there and start buying up the lots as they come available for sale and all that. A house is a house. It's sitting there, and at least if people understand that it's going to be at the minimum X distance away from my house, I think that's going to be more palatable than
Well,
saying,
I do agree with you on this citizen perceptive thing. I'm just trying to only point out that the question is going to be the property line.
well, we're damned if we do, damned if we don't.
Right.
I mean,
Well, that's what I was trying to get across to you earlier.
I think as a board and as a town, between a rock and a hard place,
Right.
trying to
Yeah, I'm just saying.
competing interests. All I'm saying is, we don't want to change, if you do away with distance, that's a significant change in the goalpost. And I think it's going to be more palatable.
You're not completely eliminating distance, you still have the safety margin distance, which is based on.
Which is what? 1,500 feet, right? Which says we can have a turbine as close as 1,500 feet to your house. Now, granted, practicality,
In practicality, they cannot.
that may be 16 or 18 or 20,000.
Take a look at the distances right here, you're over 3,000, I think, just about everywhere. And
But what about 5 years from now?
so 5 years from now, if they can make a turbine that gets it down to 2,000 feet where it's only 35 decibels, would bother you if you had a lumber mill only 2,000 feet from your house? A rock crusher only 2,000 feet from your house, provided the sound wasn't loud?
I think the missing point is, I think that the community would be more acceptance of these projects, be it a quarry, as long as they can visualize how far away, they can understand. I know how long my driveway
Well,
is.
the visualization is pretty simple.
So you're gonna walk everybody's house and show them this map and say, I'm colorblind, I can't tell dark blue from purple.
Well, you
know
measure
that?
out here and you tell them it's going to be.
So who's gonna do that selling job? Are you? I'm not.
Okay, well, let me tell you a little story what happened to me, kind of almost like the reverse of what you're saying. Okay, so it's like 1989 or something like that. I've just moved to Plymouth, Maine. Okay, and I was living down in Limerick, and I'm only maybe it was even earlier. Maybe it was 88. Okay. I'd only been out of college for a couple years. I'd lived down in Limerick. I was a land surveyor in training. I was trying to be a site evaluator, learn all this stuff. I was like a college kid and very idealistic and plan oriented, blah, blah, blah. I move into Plymouth and people come to me, and say, Eric, did you know what happened? The Portland Bangor Waste Oil Company dumped a big tank up on the hill like 15 years ago or 10 years ago, and it had all kinds of oils and stuff in it, and there's sinkers and floaters in it, and there's nothing but fractured bedrock over there. It's getting down into the bedrock, and it's nasty, and it's going to contaminate people's wells. And also, I got sucked into the planning board early on there for some reason, and I was stupid enough to continue later in my life after a 10-year hiatus for these exact type of things. So I go to the meeting thinking what a smart guy I am, because there's this giant road over there, okay? And it's clear that definitely the contamination initially is all isolated on the south end of the road. So instead of trying to have a moratorium on subdivisions throughout the entire town, or to try to figure out some mathematical model, like I could do that anyways, for where this crap is, I say let's do it south of the road. Because the other thing was, the guy owned some land there, and he wanted to come in and put in this like little mobile home subdivision with sand roads, because we didn't even have these road standards, okay? And I knew he was going to move a bunch of people who didn't have any money in there, and their wells were going to get contaminated, and they were going to have like no control over it, which is exactly what happened. Because when I went to the meeting, they had all the news channels there. I had never been in front of news before. Okay, the meeting in Plymouth was packed full of people. I didn't have a clue as to who most of the people were, because I barely lived in the town a year and a half. Okay, and I got totally blown out of the water and told what a moron I was for trying to have a moratorium to protect these people south of this line. And I said, well, they go, why'd you even do that? I go, because there's a road there, everybody knows where the road is, okay, and we don't have to do any big mathematical models, and there's crap in the ground, and we all agree there's crap in the ground, and the EPA actually was even in the room, and I got smoked. So I'm just saying, you know, even in a situation where it's clearly obvious and you can have a practical reason why, and you can point and do it, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful. So I've had the experience of doing it in the clean way and got smoked.
Well,
So it's a gambit either way.
I know, but if it doesn't hurt anything, I mean, it doesn't, you know, not affecting the existing project, as best I can tell, but if we're changing the perception will be, even if it's based solely on science, it's going to be a hard sell. We won't be able to get back. It's going to be, if you say it's only going to be based on sound, I still think, I'm repeating myself, I apologize.
No, it's good, it's fine.
I think the average citizen in Clifton, myself included, have trouble grasping what 35. Now, you know, we had the tests and all that, but even, you know, when you just can't get your arms around it.
So in all fairness, if you're gonna do it that way, you'll just, you figure out where 35 is, and that's the footage that we're gonna use.
Well,
Well, the problem with that is 35 is different in different directions.
yeah.
Whereas using the sound standard means if you have an area where the sound actually projects further than whatever arbitrary distance you've got, they're protected. Whereas if they are shielded, like one spot is here because they're behind, I guess, a big drop off or something, you've got an area that is a little bit closer right here, and there's no danger there. Shoot, it's not just 35, it's down 30. Or is that even the 25? That's the 25 line down in there.
He has a good point. I mean, you could be further away because of the terrain, and you might, the sound, depending on how many turbines are up there and what the total contribution is for the multiple turbines, you know, you could have to be further than whatever distance we come up with, further than 4,000. Probably not further than 4,000 feet, but I mean, I suppose it's possible.
I just am comfortable with us making noise, sound, the driving factor on the placement of an activity like this. Because you just, you know, like I say, it could be closer, it could be further, luck of the draw, where your house is built, where, you know, whether there's a pond on one, whatever factor attenuates noise,
Well,
sound.
right out of the blocks, just keep in mind, we're definitely 1,000 feet from the safety setback, or maybe 1,500 feet or whatever. There's somewhere, so right off the bat, that's where you are, right from the physical safety setback.
Well, okay, well that just.
Well, I know, but I just wanted to make sure
My
that.
driveway, before it curves up the hill, I don't know if y'all have ever been to my house, my driveway, my straight part of my driveway is 730 feet And I walk our trash cans down to that.
Right, I just want to make sure
So that's
that,
halfway of the safety.
I just want to make sure that we understand that we're not talking about ever getting down to 500 feet or something.
I understand that,
I
but
just want to make
it's,
sure.
it's noise, sound basis alone is a moving target based on the luck of the draw where you live, anything else.
Well, it's not actually based on the luck of the draw, it's 35 decibels.
I'm sorry?
It's not based on the luck of the draw. What luck is there involved?
Where you live?
So it's 35 decibels.
Well, people had their homes before they had a wind farm.
It's 35 if the wind is blowing enough to even make it 35 decibels, just to begin with, okay? You won't hear it because the freaking wind's blowing so hard. If that's to stay on eliminate your house.
But we're basing it solely on noise, not the aesthetics, if it's looking at your picture window, whatever.
I know that it could be.
You're letting sound be the driver on all of this, and I
Okay.
think that's wrong.
Okay,
It should be a factor,
Okay.
but not the factor.
but let's look at the aesthetics for just a second, okay? What's the difference really from 5,000 feet or 3,000 feet? If you're looking at aesthetics out your picture window, just pretend all of a sudden you wake up one morning and it's out your picture window.
I can address that very carefully. I lived in Reston, Virginia, which is the eastern seaboard's computer zone. We're high rises, most of them 20, they have some restrictions because of Dulles Airport. Let me tell you, a mile away, looking at a 25-story office building, and I can see them, versus one half that distance away, is significant. At least it was to me. Now, I chose to live in an urbanized area.
Well, no, I'm just trying to.
It's my choice to live.
Trying to get my head around.
To me, it was.
I'm just trying to get the idea around, something, that's 300 feet high or whatnot, or 350, or I forget what it is.
A lot of people live in Clifton. They live here because it's urbanized, or they live here because it's country.
Live here because it's country, but it's also quasi-industrial. We've got gravel pits, we've got woods operations.
Logging, yeah, I agree.
Where you were born in.
Yeah, or you were born here.
Right, they got, where you were born here, they used to have a sawmill right up the road, a big mill. They used to have like 50 or 100 employees there.
But can you see a sawmill from your house?
No, but I could hear it every morning when I first moved out here.
I could hear
But you
it
chose to
over an
live
hour and a
here,
half away.
knowing the sawmill was here before you moved here.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. I was psyched.
But
I was
how
very
about
bummed when
people
they took it
that
down.
have lived here before, and they build say they build a home, I don't know, one of the ponds or something, thinking they're gonna have the country. All I'm saying is, the goalposts have been moved on these people, and that's why you're getting some resistance. Now, it also brings jobs, community, the tax base. I think we all agree that there's some benefits there. But I think the concern a lot of citizens may have is basing it solely on noise, because then it becomes, well, what's that mean? I can't get my
Well,
hands
right,
around it.
okay, well, going back to it, okay, are we gonna change how are we gonna satisfy the person who's only interested in the visual part of it? Because no matter whether they hear it or don't hear it, they're gonna see it.
Well, knowing it's 4,000 feet away versus 1,500 feet, I think will help mitigate some of that.
Well, I don't think anybody will ever be 1,500 feet away from a project, but.
Potentially, it could be.
The only way they could be is if they decide to build there, and if they do, that is.
Well, no,
their-
no, that's not true. What he's implying, okay, whether it can actually happen or not, that it's a reasonable implication, I think so. He's trying to say that down the road, in the future, if we only go by sound, it's theoretically possible, especially with improvements in technology, that somebody could theoretically have somebody come erect a turbine 1,500 feet from their house because they can get the 35 decibels.
1,800 or 2,000.
That's what he's trying to make. That's the point he's making.
That's the concern I have.
But
It's a
the
moving
question
target.
is, if it's not going to bother them physically, if it's not going to affect their health, if it's not going to harm them, other than the fact that they don't like it, what right do you have to say that somebody can't build it there? What right do you have to say that, this is just like the cases on the coast when somebody builds a house and I used to be able to see the ocean and now this guy put up a house on that empty lot in front of me and I want to sue him to stop it. That's not a valid basis to say you can't build on that property.
Yeah.
Morally, I don't believe it
Okay.
is.
Can I add one more thing onto that? before you guys got on the board, you might have been on the board at the time, Aaron, we got a letter in from a citizen in the town of Clifton, because somebody built a house on the side of the mountain and painted it a different color. And the house stood out. We actually got a letter here stating that we had to send a letter to the person to have them change the color of the house because they didn't like the color. That actually took place.
Look, I came from I mentioned I live in Reston, has some of the most strictest ordinances on
Yeah.
external. So I can understand that, and that's one reason I moved to Clifton, was to exclude that, and get out of that kind of environment. This is obviously a contentious issue for the whole town, but if we do away with the distance, if we make it solely based on sound, and not sound and distance, basically, I think we're doing a disservice to the community, in that, first of all, it doesn't affect the existing program. If it does, then maybe we ought to discuss that, but I don't think it does. But it would affect future ones. But it's basically the same rules that the existing applicant applied.
What we're actually trying to do is make it so that it's easy, because right now, the other issue we have, we shouldn't be dealing with any particular applications, all right? But even what we're trying to do also now, though, is to fit there's no operational permits have been issued, okay? So we're trying to fit the current project into, future standards, by having an enforceable operational permit. Okay, so that does play into this somewhat, because technically, if we go back under the old standard, then, first of all, we'll be in the developer and everybody else will be in court forever trying to prove or disprove compliance, because it's not possible to prove compliance with the current operational permitting standards. So the developer will just, it'll be an endless court battle for whoever to do it. And the town will actually have to say we can't enforce it because it's not possible to enforce because it's incorrectly written. Because it was all cut and pasted from something that was actually never done. This is what we have now, is something that's actually manageable and enforceable, and instead of having a 40 decibel limit, we want to get it down to 35 decibels for existing project. Existing project is permitted at 40 decibels. So in theory, the current project, if it's a little bit on the loud side, which is, according to this map, going back to your prediction philosophy, according to this map, we shouldn't have any issues. But let's say that they were wrong for some reason, which I doubt they are, but let's just say that they were, because you brought it up earlier. We're trying to get them in under 35 decibels instead of 40 decibels. So, to me, I feel like that's another, I don't want to call it a concession, I think it's a good management practice.
Well, y'all are free to vote as you please. I just think if what's going to happen, I think, is if we go base it solely on sound, I hate to use the word for it, base it on sound, then people are going to claim that there's no limit. The safety limit will be your only protection, that 1,500 feet or whatever. Now, realizing that, the likelihood of that actually happening is remote, but it certainly could be 2,500 feet.
That's probably a reasonable statement. It could be 2,500 feet.
There could be 2,500 feet at your house and 22 at my house.
Correct. That's true.
And I think that's going to be a harder sell in the community. But if you say it's going to be down to a certain sound level, and it's going to be, at the very minimum, it's going to be so far away, I think it's going to be much more palatable to the bulk of the people.
So 90% of the residents in the town of Clifton, they would never be able to get a wind turbine built within 2,500 feet of their house.
Like the way it is now, I'm asking.
Right.
So are you saying that they should be able to? I don't know what you're saying. I'm trying to get.
No, I totally agree with keeping the noise levels the way that they, the way it's written, because I don't think you'll ever see, any turbines being built other than what there is there, because you're going to be able to get within 2,500 feet or so of anybody's dwellings.
So tantamount, that would be tantamount to basically legislating it out of the building. Well,
Right, that's part of the issue, and so we have to answer these questions, but, you know, then we can come back to this, but that is kind of, you know, on the principle of the issue here is, do you figure out, like, what you need to do to throw stuff on the wall, so to speak, to make sure something doesn't happen, or do you go with things that are actually provable events?
I'll say once again, I'm uncomfortable with it based solely on sound. I know the science is developing, even Hessler is, you know, there's more and more studies, the data has been, you know, at times contradictory. You know, this low, even he doesn't know why, you know, people moved out of their house, maybe they just did it as protest or whatever, he cited, but fact matter, whatever the cause, some people take it dramatic. You know, I just think that history is replete on some activities that, well, there's no danger now, and you know, cell phones and all this, we can argue that till.
Well, right, but the fact of the matter is, it's
matter
not both
is,
sides
it's
of
an
the issue.
extra safety margin that makes the project such as this more palatable. Now, if, as Gerald's saying, we're essentially legislating them out of existence by doing that, and maybe we ought to, you know, that's.
We've almost legislated it out of existence by using a 35 dBA sound standard. Because basically, you're asking for these turbines to be no louder than this room was when everybody was dead quiet the other day.
Let's do an experiment then. You have noisy neighbors. Let's do a sound test when they are being noisy.
Oh, I've done it.
And is it 35 decibels? Is it 30? Is it 80? You know, I mean, it may not be a good example, but
I'm confident that when I was having a noisy neighbor issue, it was well into the 80s and 90s.
I live up on a hill and we get a lot of noise, and I've never done a test, but I can, you know, I'm sure it's up in the 70s. I mean, it gets loud. But, you know, I just hate the idea. I just have a fundamental issue with sound being the only driver.
Okay, all right, we let's go back and answer the questions, and then we'll come back to this. Wait a minute. Pick up the wrong. Let me put the download first. You want to open or save? You want to open. There. So now, maybe one other thing. Yeah, it's not going to actually read it. It's somewhere. So this was Peter Rector's first question, and the purpose of having these up here right now is so that we have consensus on how to answer the questions, or we make the changes so that I can get answers for both of these questions. So I have a permit for an accessory residential unit. How are you proposed going to affect it? So they shouldn't. None of the proposed LUL amendments will affect an accessory residential unit. I mean, well, actually, that's not entirely true. I mean, technically, you know, it might be within, if we go with sound standards alone, it might be within less than 4,000 feet.
That doesn't apply to the existing.
He evidently got this permit after the fact.
So really, from a really technical perspective, the outcome completely depends on the outcome of whatever the Supreme Court case is. Because if the Supreme Court case, there's kind of two options. If he loses the Supreme Court case, then the permit goes back into place and it's irrelevant. Okay? If he wins the Supreme Court case, then there'll be another court case over whose application is senior. Okay, it will be whether the Fuller application that we tabled in the fall is senior, or whether the Beckford application for the residential permit is senior, and so it'll be for the courts to decide. So really, it has nothing really to do with us.
Outcome?
Outcome, I think would be best. P is next to O.
Yeah.
Jeez, I hate these keys. Keys. Jeez, I'm used to having keys that are are more tactile than these like little flat keys. Okay. So it does meet that. So actually, I talked to Rick today, and there is only one, there are 4 structures, I think there's 4 map structures on the site. The house, and what's behind the house is a shed, and then there's 2 other structures that initially were for residential use, however, only one additional structure has been permitted for residential use when Rick reviewed the permit today and told me, as far as the structures on the property, so there is no requirement for an additional permit for a second residential structure. So there's only 2 residences on the site that are permitted, his dwelling and that residential structure that's up close to the property line. Right, so I don't even know what this is from, it's just, basically this was already taken care of before. So then that's the other one. So read through those and see if you're okay with those. Anybody have any issues with that?
You're missing the last question of his on there.
What was the last question?
Had to do with litigation. You got the answer, but you don't have.
There's only 3 questions.
Now, there was another sentence.
Well, there's the 3 questions right there. Look on the screen.
Go down to the bottom. Are you tailoring an ordinance amendment to deal with my cabin? Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was thinking that was, that you missed putting that in, I guess you didn't.
There. So, yes, no, maybe so.
Yes.
Okay, hang on a second. I need. Really, this is annoying. I had no idea that Windows could become. Okay, close that one. Radius, let's close down. Minimize that. Minimize that. Back up. On that. Back to the sent items. Whoops. There's your trees. You're right back.
I think it's occupied, Dave.
I'm sorry?
If you head into the restroom, I think it's occupied.
Oh. Right.
Just not wait. There's no real open there. All right, and all right. So there's the first one. And actually, I checked this tonight. Okay. This is actually the first one. Review of the March 2011 annual town meeting. It was determined this was never voted voted off the accepted list. So that's the answer to that one, because it wasn't ever taken off.
You gonna put it back in?
Well, yeah, you just add it to the list again, because it was never removed, because the
Oh, well,
whole
yeah.
premise that we were going off of was, is we thought that it was taken out, but it was never taken out, so
Right.
it needs to get put back into the list of, you can't put something there.
Well, no, if we pass an ordinance, we can take it out now.
Well, we can, well, I mean, if you want to talk about taking it out,
Well,
I
the
mean,
only question is,
That's what John wanted,
John wanted, and
he owns one.
it's
Well-
it isn't like a lot of people go there, or is of any particular,
You can't even get up there anymore anyway, because it's dedicated off.
yeah.
I don't know, I mean, I'll do either one, I'm just saying, I mean, if we take that off, then why don't we take the other ones off?
Wouldn't bother me, actually, but.
Well, no, I know, but I'm just trying to,
Nobody's asked.
I know.
The owners of the others haven't asked,
Well, that's true, the owners haven't asked if they have to take it off.
nor were they really upset over it when they found out they were.
Okay, before we
I thought
could,
John was gonna.
before we remove it from the list, we ought to check with John to see if he wants it on or off.
Well, I'm not gonna, he wants it off, okay, he made some comments, I was told, so anyway, I don't wanna really repeat them, but anyway, because I want him to speak for himself.
Yeah, well, we can stick it back in for now and forget it and wait until he comes up with it again once in a while.
Dave, the nutshell is it wasn't taken out in 2011 like we thought. So the question is, you know, I thought we should just add it back in, but then we were kind of discussing briefly whether we should take it off or put it on. I mean, personally, because we all thought it was off and it was off the list or whatever, I think that if we're gonna like take it off, I feel like we should have a discussion about all 5 of them at the same time or whatever, as opposed to just arbitrarily taking it off.
He owns,
He owns Woodchuck Hill. Now, Vern pointed out, I mean, and which is the point for taking it off, he's of the owners of all those parcels that are listed, he's the only one to ask that it get taken off, and he was never asked permission to put it on.
not being a real estate lawyer, but I think you'd have to petition to have us take it. If it's on and has been on for whatever reason, right or wrong, I mean, I don't feel strongly one way or the other, but he's the property owner, he should be requesting, I don't